other thing is that many of the people waking up after 4 or 5 hours were supposed to go to bed earlier.
I think everyone's been in this kind of situation where the thing that's stressing you out is not going to get resolved today, and you just sleep.
The curtain rises on Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman, unveiling a sleep revelation that promises to be a game changer, inviting viewers into a world where the secret lies in a profound focus on the sleep experience.
Yeah, I'm not encouraging people to take anything, but there's a very, very famous Nobel Prize winning neuroscientist who I went to his office to visit him in New York, and he chewed 7 pieces of Nicorette during that half-hour meeting. And I was like, what is going on here? And he said, well, first of all, it increases plasticity. And second of all, he has the belief, and this is not a clinical study, but he thinks that it can also hold off certain forms of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
The spotlight is on the intricacies of the brain, as Huberman and Rogan dissect how it navigates and transforms between different states of consciousness, unlocking the mysteries that can revolutionize the way we approach sleep.
And then in the final third is where you finally get to relax, because the brain doesn't shift states very quickly. We can go from sleep to wakefulness quickly. We can go from wakefulness to sleep quickly, but we don't shift between different states of consciousness like a step function, except in rare cases, right? Fear is one. All of a sudden we hear it right now, it's a step function. We're in fear or we're in alertness.
The drama intensifies with the revelation that better sleep is not just a luxury, but a necessity for a more fulfilling life. A pivotal moment in the unfolding narrative that reshapes the audience's perception of rest.
So that you can start thinking about other possibilities. Or, there are instances, I think everyone's been in this kind of situation, where the thing that's stressing you out is not going to get resolved today, and you just sleep. And of course, you need to sleep, and then you can't sleep. And then of course, that creates a compounding stress. And now you're stressed about not being able to sleep. And then over the course of the next few days, you dissolve into a puddle of tears.
A cautionary note echoes through the narrative, revealing the one thing you must absolutely avoid before plunging into the realm of sleep. A dramatic twist that could alter the course of the audience's bedtime routine.
Even for a conversation at work, step out in front of the building. And then in the evening, dim those screen lights. If you're out on stage and you got the blaring lights in your eyes and you're dealing with that, afterwards, there are some things that can help. And then for most people, make sure you're not going to bed right after chugging a big glass of water. One of the most common problems with sleep is people wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom.
The plot thickens as Huberman and Rogan unveil the secrets to achieving quicker and more profound focus. A tantalizing prospect for those seeking enhanced productivity and mental acuity in their daily lives.
Well, your receptors have never seen that level of nicotine before. And they like that.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for those moments, your acetylcholine is like a spotlight. Mm-hmm. It brings your vision literally into this more kind of portrait mode where you can see more like a narrow window of what's going on. There are behavioral ways to access this too. Before a fight, if somebody's really ramped up, their world is they're not seeing everything. They're probably, I've never done the walk, of course, but probably walking out to the octagon, they're not seeing all the color of the hat of the woman in the corner. They're not relaxed, they're hyped up.
Right.
But that's a trigger for plasticity because the brain needs some way to cue this plasticity process to let itself know, because it's a self-learning organ, let itself know that something's really different. That's adrenaline. Something's changed. Then there's focus. What's changed? So in the jujitsu example you gave earlier, it's the ability to focus on what the sequence is, what happens when, and okay, I did that correctly or I didn't do that correctly, but that's duration, path, and outcome again.
A pivotal distinction is drawn between modulators and mediators of focus, adding depth to the narrative and providing viewers with crucial insights into the mechanisms that govern their ability to concentrate.
First of all, we have to distinguish between modulators and mediators, and I'll do this very briefly. There are a lot of things that will modulate your state of focus, but they don't directly mediate your sense of focus. So for instance, if right now a fire alarm went off in this building, it would modulate our attention. We would get up and leave. It would be very hard to do what we're doing with that banging in the background, at least at first. So it's modulating focus, but it's not really involved in the mechanisms of focus, right? In the same way, being well rested when you sleep, your autonomic nervous system that adjusts states of alertness and focus and calm works better than when you're sleep deprived. So if you're sleeping better, you're going to focus better. So I always answer this way to a question like this because the best thing that anyone can do for their mental health, physical health, and performance in athletic or cognitive endeavors or creative endeavors is to make sure that you're getting enough quality sleep enough of the time for you. And that's going to differ. We could talk about what that means. Now, in terms of things that mediate focus, without getting into the description of mechanisms, because we have podcasts about that, it's very clear that mental focus follows visual focus, provided that you're a sighted person. Much of the training that's being done now in China to teach kids to focus better literally has them stare at a target, blinking every so often, but really training themselves to breathe calmly and maintain a tight visual aperture. When you read, you have to maintain a tight visual aperture. You're literally scrolling like a highlighter in your mind's eye, right? It's kind of obvious once you hear it. So for people that have problems focusing, sleep well, learn to dilate and contract your visual field consciously. This can be done if you practice it a little bit. And then, as I said before, it is very hard to get into a state of focus like a step function immediately, like snapping your fingers. What you can do is you can pick any object, but ideally an object at roughly the same distance, placed at roughly the same distance to which you're going to do that work.
And having acetylcholine and noradrenaline up, that sets the plasticity trigger. However, that doesn't guarantee that those synapses are going to change. It does not mean that you're necessarily going to learn.
Oh, no.
What guarantees that that process will be converted into literally the change in the connections between neurons, sometimes new neurons, but mostly the change in the strength of the connection, so that eventually you don't have to do duration path outcome. You can just be reflexive about it, is states of deep sleep and any state where you're not doing duration path outcome. So we know from 2 recent studies, some of this was done by my lab, but by other labs as well, in humans, which I think is important to distinguish between mouse and human where we can. A lot of the changes in these brain structures occurs after learning during deep sleep, in particular slow wave sleep. But it also occurs during periods of naps and shallow sleep, or even just periods where people deliberately decompress, where they're not focusing on any one thing in particular. So if we were going to kind of operationalize this process, it would be focus intensely, have an intense period of urgency, and then access the deepest rest you can where you're not thinking about anything, where space and time becomes very fluid.
The drama takes a poignant turn as the importance of being well rested for a healthier nervous system is laid bare, transforming the narrative into a compelling exploration of the profound impact of sleep on overall well-being.
If you're having a full-blown panic attack, then the alertness system is, it's as if the seesaw is tilted all that way. If you have, if you're deeply asleep, well, then the calmness system is really tilted down. You could say that's a portion of the seesaw. This is all kind of obvious and it dates back, 100 years or so, which isn't that long in the history of science, but we've known this sort of thing for a while. Okay, what's interesting and I think more relevant nowadays is to think about one's own interpretation of those signals and how that relates to anxiety and, as you pointed out, exploration, and then to think about where the nodes of control are. In this seesaw model that I'm putting forward, the seesaw has to include what I would call a hinge, a location in the middle in which you can voluntarily adjust the seesaw to either be more tilted toward alert or more tilted toward asleep. And for many people, they find that their overall level of autonomic arousal is either inappropriate or inadequate for the demands of their life. Inappropriate meaning their heart is racing, they feel more jittery, more as if movement would be the default and worry would be the default and anticipation is the default than is appropriate for their circumstances. Waking up in the morning and feeling stressed, for instance, immediately without any immediate cause or maybe stress about real life events. For other people, they feel more exhausted than they would like. They're having a hard time leaning into the pressures of daily life. Both of those, even though they have sort of polarized phenotypes, they look very different. In one case, over energized, and in one case, under energized. Both originate within the autonomic nervous system. And we can reliably say from work done in animals and humans that that is not the consequence of the alertness system or the calmness system being disrupted, but rather that hinge in the middle is dysregulated.
The connection between mental focus and visual focus becomes a central theme, unraveling the symbiotic relationship that could hold the key to unlocking heightened states of concentration and awareness.
I do. I'm a big napper. I love taking a 20-minute nap or doing an NSDR in the afternoon. The rule on naps, and Matt Walker and I agree on this, is that naps should be shorter than 90 minutes, and they should you should only take them if they don't disrupt your nighttime sleep. I love naps. And I can sleep anywhere, anytime now because I do the NSDR. So if I just decide I'm going to lie down and pass out, I can just do that. It just happens. And so I'm big on naps for a couple of reasons. There are several very good papers that were published in the last few years in the journal Cell Report showing that short naps and NSDR, I should say, has some good science to support it, accelerates neuroplasticity and learning, especially if you take that nap within 4 to 6 hours after a very intense learning bout. There's something about that sleep state that allows the brain to rewire. And most of the rewiring and neuroplasticity occurs during deep sleep, but also during these short sleep bouts that we call naps or NSDR. So I'm a huge fan. And yeah, my evening is basically just trying to take things down a notch. And everything's a little bit quieter, a little bit mellower. Occasionally I'll get a bout of focused writing in during that 1 hour peak or something of that sort. I'm just really trying to taper everything. I try not walk the dog at night, but sometimes the dog needs to walk. So it's not that I'm super strict about this. Occasionally I will go, take the dog out for a walk or watch a movie, but most of the time it's a progressive mellowing toward the evening. And then in the morning, we started pretty early today, and I'm up and at 'em, and all day long I'm going.
The narrative crescendos with the revelation of a secret technique for attaining a faster and more profound focus state, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, eager to integrate this newfound knowledge into their lives.
I'll start with what I've doubled down on. I've doubled down on the idea, which perhaps I stated last time we spoke and perhaps not, but I certainly believe that our state of mind and body at any point in time is strongly dictated by our state of mind and body in the hours and days prior to that. And on the one hand, people are going to hear that and say, well, duh. If you're sleep deprived, you're going to feel like garbage. And if you're well rested, you'll feel great. That's kind of the top contour of it. Mm-hmm. But when one looks at the neuroscience, for instance, of sleep, you start to realize that, the amount of rapid eye movement sleep that you're going to get in any 90-minute bout of sleep, as your sleep is broken up into these 90-minute segments, more or less, is strongly dictated by the ratio of slow wave sleep, aka deep sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep that you had in the previous 90-minute bout. And then when you start to look at the research in terms of waking states, you start to find that your ability to be focused, say for a bout of work in the morning or the afternoon, or a creative brainstorm session, or to maybe drill into some personal issue that you're dealing with during therapy or just on a walk or while journaling, is not a square wave function. None of us should sit down and expect ourselves to just drop into that state. Mm-hmm. Much of our ability to move into that state effectively, whatever effective means, right, whatever the target or goal of that bout, as I'm calling it, is going to be dictated by what happened in the previous moments and hours. And so when I zoom out from that, what I've doubled down on is this idea that there are just a core set of foundational things that we have to re-up every 24 hours.
In a climactic and triumphant finale, Huberman and Rogan declare the substantial role of sleep in reshaping and improving every facet of life, leaving viewers with a sense of urgency to prioritize and optimize their sleep patterns for a brighter tomorrow.
The other thing is that many of the people waking up after 4 or 5 hours were supposed to go to bed earlier. Remember, melatonin puts you to sleep but doesn't keep you asleep. So many of these people might be going to bed at 11 o'clock, waking up at 3 or 4 a.m., like, here I am again, when actually they need to go to bed at 9. Now, there's this weird asymmetry in the way that our system is built, in that we can push through fatigue, but it's very hard to make ourselves fall asleep. So some people need to discover that they actually were meant to go to bed earlier. I know people think about night owls and morning larks and this kind of thing. That's a big idea in industry. And to some extent, it's true. There are genetic polymorphisms that relate to these things. But for the most part, most people were, evolved under conditions where they went to sleep shortly after the sun went down. So with age, I'm going to bed earlier and earlier. I realize there's some lifestyle factors too, but I do think that there is something powerful about going to bed a little earlier. I keep asking Matt Walker if there's any science to support this, and he tells me no. But I find, and many people find, that every hour of sleep before midnight recharges them more deeply than the hours after midnight. And I don't know what this is, but I find if I go to bed at 9 o'clock and I'll sometimes wake up at midnight, I'm like, it's only midnight. What am I going to do? But then I fall back asleep. I'll wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. and I'm ready to go. And that's great. I mean, you can get so much done in the hours between 4 and 7 a.m. Fewer distractions. Your focus can be very high. The problem is most people are going to bed late. They're waking up at 4 or 5 hours later. Then they're scrolling on their phone because it's a very kind of passive sensory input. They're trying to get themselves back to sleep. It doesn't work. And then throughout the day, they're working at about 75% capacity. So I would encourage those people to just start going to bed earlier.